Welcome food fans, picky eaters, the flavor curious, and everyone in between. Nothing makes good food better than good conversation. And your table is ready. Come right this way to the Food for Thoughtcast with your host, Melissa Reagan. But you can call her Chef. All right, let's get this episode started.
Hey there, food fans. Today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking to David Page, the two-time Emmy-winning creator, developer, and executive producer of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Additionally, the author of Food Americana, the remarkable people and incredible stories behind America's favorite dishes. We had an awesome time chatting with each other, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, welcome back to the Food for Thoughtcast with me, your host, Melissa Reagan. Today we're talking with David Page. How are you, David?
I'm terrific. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. I want to know what the most amazing thing you ate this week was.
I ate a Philadelphia roast pork sandwich that I made myself, which descends from the Abruzzese immigration from Italy to the Philadelphia area many years ago. And it's, I use tenderloin, you can use butt, but I cook up some roast tenderloin and then I put good provolone cheese, not the garbage that you buy by the slice. Broccoli rabe, although the original version of the sandwich actually was spinach, but now broccoli rabe's kind of the standard. And oil and vinegar, and heat that all up on good crusty Italian bread in the oven, and it is to die for.
Okay, guys, well, the podcast is over. I have to go buy all these things and make this immediately because now I'm too hungry to go on.
Well, but you see, that's the thing with regional food. You're in Texas. So I would choose a dish perhaps with tortillas, because to make this sandwich properly, you need South Jersey, Philadelphia style bread.
Oh, I could find it. I might not be able to get it today, but I could find it.
Good luck.
So the internet, it's an amazing thing. Like I will find
bakery. What's the bakery in New Orleans that does the bread for the po' boys? It's like, I want to say Leinenkugel, which it's not. That's a kind of beer, but it's a particular bakery in New Orleans, and they ship bread now, and that's
really,
yeah. If I'll look it up before we're done. It's remarkable.
A lot of places will ship for the right price. I mean, it's just amazing. And especially during the pandemic, you saw places that were shipping their items as well.
Yeah. And you know what? On the one hand, that's wonderful. On the other hand, the old curmudgeon in me, the guy who's yelling, "Hey, kids, get off of the shed." I'm kind of sad that the regional unavailability of stuff is dying. It used to be special to go to Memphis to get Memphis style barbecue, or to go to Central Texas to get brisket barbecue. Now with everybody shipping all over, some of that, it's still better where it came from, but some of that specialness, which is not a word, but what the heck, is eroding.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and it takes all the fun out of having the experience. And even if somebody does a really great job packaging it and shipping it to you and everything else, like, you're still missing the water in a place is different. The air is different, the sights and the sounds and the smells, and getting to experience it with the people that live that, it's that lived experience every single day. It takes some of that away. I looked it up. I couldn't wait. Leidenheimer, I think, is the
that is correct. That's the bread that you get most of the po' boys on. And it's an interesting, it's a unique kind of crustiness and very soft on the inside, and so good.
Yeah.
And the best thing to do with New Orleans oysters, because those of us who live on the water in the Northeast will tell you that if you're going to eat them unadorned, oysters are much better up here than they are down in the warm waters of the Gulf.
Of course. You have like the, what is it, Blue Point? That's the famous.
Blue Points are the famous. Well, see, I
Yeah.
live on the Jersey Shore, and
Mhm.
we have Delaware Bay oysters down here. And what cracks me up is because they're the local oyster, they don't get respect. And when you go to happy hour at an oyster bar around here, you can get those for $1 each. And then the imported ones are like $2 and $2.50. Well,
Right.
to my taste, the Delaware Bays are the best anyway. So I'm in there at $1 a shuck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they know they have the market cornered. They know who will pay what for what, right?
Sure. Well, look, anything not in its home is more expensive. Remember when Coors? Well, no, you don't. You're too young. There was a time.
I thank you for that compliment.
That, believe me, you do not remember this. There was a time you could only get Coors beer west of the Rockies. And that made it highly desirable back east. I mean, Paul Newman would often be photographed at his Connecticut home with Coors that somehow he had obtained. Once they started selling Coors beer all over the country, the realization quickly hit that it's a kind of crappy beer.
Well, I feel the same about Yingling, and there was a time very recently that you couldn't get it in Texas.
Well, Yingling, I mean, I live in South Jersey. I am no fan of Yingling, but I did a syndicated series called Beer Geeks, where we explored the world of craft beer in some detail. So, and I didn't know a lot about beer before we started that. So I'm now dangerous. I know just enough to pick a beer or two in a particular location.
Just enough to cause a little trouble.
Yeah, well, in fact, Michael Ferguson, who is a well-known craft brewing expert and was the host of my series, he and I are about to write a book on craft beer. So,
I can't wait. I'll be looking forward to it.
Please.
I want to talk about your other book really quickly. It's called Food Americana, The Remarkable People and Incredible Stories Behind America's Favorite Dishes. This is a wonderful book. I would encourage all my listeners to check it out. I will post a link at the foodforthoughtcast.com right underneath David's pick and bio for anybody that's interested. But this book is incredible. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that resonates with me the most in this book is there's a line in there about Russin Daughters when you're talking about Russin Daughters in Manhattan. I was blessed enough to get to try it for the first time as a Texan who had never been to New York.
Oh my God, perfect.
Yeah, just a couple years ago. And I got like a classic bagel and lox, and I got a tub of whitefish salad, and I was in heaven. I don't think anybody in Texas has ever seen a proper whitefish anything, but being landlocked, well, we're not landlocked, but I'll argue that the Gulf seafood doesn't stand up to other places, and that's fine. Many have called me a traitor to Texas in that regard, but that's
okay. Honesty is honesty.
I also will echo what's written in the preface is that you're a person who lives to eat instead of eating to live. And I'm absolutely the same way. But when you talk about, they say that they're artisans before artisanal was hip. I think that's at the core of so much important food culture, right? And it's getting back to where it needs to be.
We're obviously a bifurcated or trifurcated food society. At the same time that fast food continues to flourish, and that the average American considers Applebee's a hometown bar. There are pockets. There are those who are trying to get back to the artisanal nature of real food. And I don't mean that in the snooty, it's got to be organic, grown on a Tuesday. No, it's just got to be handmade food done well. And look, they've been slicing lox or smoked salmon, which are really two different things, at Russin Daughters for nearly 110 years now. It was artisan because that's how everything was done. There was no option. Things were done by hand. And then over time, we developed ways to not do them by hand For example, the Lender brothers who developed frozen bagels, mostly made possible by the advent of freezing technology and the invention in California of the automatic bagel making machine. Well, the automatic bagel making machine resulted in a softer, less, quote, authentic, as much as I hate that word, bagel. And as Murray Lender, not Murray, who was it? Murray? No, it was Marvin. Marvin Lender. Murray had passed on. I spoke to Marvin, and he said, "Look, I couldn't have sold an authentic New York Jewish bagel in the Midwest, where people were used to dinner rolls and white bread. So of course it was a different product." Well, what's happening now is there are places in the Midwest, Rosenberg's in Denver, for example, where they've gone back to making real bagels by hand, boiling them. That's a wonderful thing to see, and it's happening in most kinds of food. You're seeing Mexican food. I've got a place here in town that is they do their own masa for tortillas.
Oh, I love that.
And on Wednesdays, they do tamales from the masa. Last Wednesday, my wife and I went for dinner, and the tamales were gone. So tomorrow, which will be Wednesday, we're going for lunch. But there's this belief that doing things by hand or doing things in an artisanal manner is complicated or slow. I'm going to make a roast chicken tonight. I'm not going to buy a rotisserie chicken. I'm going to take a chicken. I'm going to put it in a skillet with potatoes, onions, carrots. I'm going to top it with salt and pepper. I'm going to pour in some stock, and I'm going to put it in the oven at 500.
Right.
That's it. It's going to take me 10 minutes to make a real home-cooked meal. Less time than it would take, he said on his rant, to open the little plastic packages of salt and pepper that come in one of those meal kits for which you pay far too much money.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of satisfaction that could come out of doing something for yourself from start to finish. But I 100% understand the intent in saying, like, it just has to be, good food, homemade, handmade. Well, it's no shade to anybody that's using a convenience item. It's just saying that, like, everything that's artisanal doesn't have to be complicated. Like you said, it's so simple, but we've lost sight of that because we don't prioritize time in that way as a society anymore.
Also, it's funny, as food snobs will talk about how they cook. I have no problem with convenience items. God forbid I have a jar full of minced garlic that I buy at the grocery store.
I will also use that.
I generally chop a little fresh garlic in because I want to stumble across a piece or two. But there's nothing in cooking I hate more than dealing with garlic. You have to smash it. You got to peel it. It's
when it has all that paper stuck to it, and it's just
a particular cooking task I'm not particularly fond of. So I use minced garlic a lot. I don't necessarily grind my black pepper every time. Supposedly if it's not fresh ground, well, come on. I keep a convenience bowl of salt and pepper that I've pre-mixed next to my stove. Because,
it's interesting too. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I've never understood what good more shame would do for somebody that you're trying to get to come along on a food journey with you. I always tell people, like, there's really no problem with, if you have to use a box cake mix sometime, that's totally fine. It's just pre-measured dry ingredients. Now, are there some shelf stabilizers and some extra cream and tartar?
I'll survive it.
Are there some things to make it last longer on the shelf? Great. But also, your ancestors and predecessors understood how to make things last longer too. And a lot of the methods that they use, like salting meat, would be frowned upon today because of, like, health stigma. So just tell people, like, hey, you don't have to feel bad. If you're going to feel bad, I would rather you do something that, is more approachable to you, but still have, like, fun being engaged and invested in the process.
Absolutely. I got to tell you something. It's funny too, because there are certain prepared foods that we've become a culture to acclimated to those tastes and expect
Mhm.
the best. I'm Jewish. The best matzo balls on earth are the Manischewitz boxed mix.
Yeah, they
I don't
are.
care. I don't care what you do to try to make them completely. Yeah, you can doctor them. You can throw in some seltzer, whatever, but you're not going to beat a Manischewitz matzo ball.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't matter if you like sinkers or floaters. Like you can add a little bit of baking powder to that mix, but man, the flavor is dead on, and that's what I use too. And I've made them homemade before. It's like no,
There's a
just
funny story about that Shake Shack. When they
Mhm.
first opened, they wanted to do everything from scratch, and customers rejected their from scratch French fries because all of America is completely acclimated to frozen fries. And
Yes.
they serve frozen fries now because it's what the customers expect.
It's really hard. I love French fries, and I've never turned one down in any form. I'm not ashamed to say, but it's really hard to duplicate that starch crispness that we're accustomed to, and they're spraying that on when they're frozen.
Right.
I mean, it's a side product of mass production. I don't even know that it was the goal primarily, like when frozen fries were first, becoming a thing, right? And then you had McDonald's, they used beef tallow, and that's why they tasted so good. And there's all the different textures, right? Like the curly fries at Arby's
Mm.
and Wendy's, but it's really hard to duplicate those things by hand.
It
And that's
is.
another
Now
thing
it's fun if you have the time. I mean, do you double fry them, or do you bathe them in vinegar first and then fry them, or pickle juice?
so if I'm making a homemade French fry, I'm going to blanch them
Right.
at like 225. Like rinse them till the water goes clear a couple of times, hold them in water, blanch, chill, and then fry. But I also prefer I like a coating. So,
Right.
I like a coating, a little dusting of cornstarch and your seasoning, and almost like a battered fry that you might find like in a seafood place. Um, you know, it just
What's
depends,
interesting?
but I'm not doing that on a Monday night,
Well, no, of course not. But it's interesting. I've never explored. I wonder how the French and Belgians make fries. Because when you do fries in Belgium or steak frite, for example, those tend to be damn fine. And I don't
They
know
really
what
are.
the process is.
Well, they're not using an Idaho russet
Well, yeah.
for starters,
Yeah.
so they're using some more similar to a Cannaback that's part starch, part wax, but it really makes a huge difference in the final bite of the fry. But they're also using a two-step cooking
Right.
process. So there's really nothing compares to like a cone of frites with mayo. It's so good.
Oh, God.
You're making me so hungry. What time will the roasted chicken be ready? Because I can hit the road now. Make it for leftovers tomorrow.
I'm going to back time it to around 6:15, I think. So come on over.
Got it. Yeah.
We'll sit out back. We'll look at the
tomorrow.
water. We'll have a martini. We'll have some chicken.
I love it. So for your martini, I have to know vodka or gin?
Vodka, so it's not truly a martini.
Okay. I was just wondering. It's no judgment.
What's
there.
interesting, though, you talk about the snootiness of food. To this day, I still order the same martini, and I'm finding it harder and harder to get the vodka I want, because while it was the top shelf brand in its day, it's now been eclipsed. I order a dry Stoli martini up with a twist. And Stoli in my day was, ooh, that's the vodka. And now it's Grey Goose, which has far too much taste in it. I get, what's the one from Texas? Tito's.
Tito's, yeah.
But no, I just go for your basic dry Stoli martini.
I love it. I like gin myself. I lived in Austin for 9 years, so Tito's was kind of the go-to for every cocktail for a number of years. But I always drink a very dry Hendrick's gin martini. That's a nice gin. I like the botanicals.
Yeah, but see, that's interesting. Gin has a defined flavor that you're looking for, and you can say, I like this more than that. The reality of vodka is it's almost flavorless, except now they're putting flavor in. I'm not talking about, lemon or vanilla. I'm talking
Right.
about you give me a French vodka, I can tell you right away. There's just something there I don't want in my vodka.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it seems like everything comes full circle with food trends, as I'm sure you know. But
Oh, yes.
I'm sure there's always a number of defectors who will say that it has to be this way, it has to be this potato, it has to be this grain, or it's really not the real thing. But people are finding more. We have all these supply chain issues, right? And people are finding more and more innovative ways to use fairly normal or unassuming things to make extraordinary products.
Yes.
And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in every single food market. It lies in the willingness of the consumer to be open-minded and try something new. So,
Right. And that, bizarrely enough, that boils down to the marketer somehow convincing you through a story that may or may not be completely accurate, but it's all a story.
right. Right. Well, I think food is the ultimate form of storytelling.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, for the listeners, in case you don't know, David was a journalist for a very long time. You walked through Checkpoint Charlie. You covered a majority of the early Iraqi military events, right? You said that you ate. I read before
the war started. I was thrown
correct.
out before. Yeah.
You had gotten out just in time, right? That's where your story of eating the caprese salad.
Yeah, I would have preferred to have stayed, but we were kicked out, and so I had been in Baghdad for quite a while, and was exhausted and asked the folks booking my way out. These were the old days when you could do things like this. I asked the Rome Bureau. I was headed back to Frankfurt, but I asked them if they could book me through Rome so I could spend a night at the Hassler Hotel, which at the time was, probably still is, was one of the 10 best in the world at the top of the Spanish Steps. They said, of course. And I said, the only thing they need to know is that I haven't seen a vegetable in weeks. And when I check in, I'd like a caprese salad.
Right.
Which for anyone on the face of the earth who doesn't know is a slice of tomato topped with mozzarella, basil, and depending upon what you wish, olive oil and balsamic. So I get to the Hassler and I check in, and seconds after I'm in my room, there's a knock on the door and I open it up. And the room service waiter comes in with this massive silver tray with a cover on it. And he uncovers it, and it is the largest collection of caprese on the face of the earth. And there was no way I could possibly eat that. And as soon as he left, I ate it all. I just gorged on it.
Yeah. Challenge accepted, you said.
Incredible tomatoes and the mozz. Look, food in Italy is something special. So yeah, that was pretty good.
But you were a journalist, you got the opportunity to travel all around the world. And I guess my question about it is, was the love of food always there? Or how does one go from what you were previously doing to, say, becoming the creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives? Like, was it a natural progression, or one came before the other?
Storytelling is storytelling. And so to that extent, it was no different. But it was when I was sent overseas by NBC News as a producer, never having even considered the possibility of living out of this country. And I got there and realized I'm going to all these countries that at the moment I don't know anything about. And one of the ways I found to learn about a country, its history, its mindset, was to eat its food, and especially to eat its food with locals. Food tells you so much. I mean, in Tuscany, they eat wild boar. Why? Because they were poor, and if you couldn't shoot it, you weren't going to eat.
Right.
In Greece, the small plates that make up a mezza are pretty much reflective of the mindset of Greek society. There was a philosopher by the name of Epicurus, and yes, that's where the word Epicurean comes from, who wrote that you should choose with whom you are going to eat before you choose what you are going to eat, because to eat alone is to be like a wolf, which I guess he thought was a bad thing. There, and that's, look, I was lucky enough to travel Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Did not do Asia. And experience all sorts of cultures and all sorts of foods, and it certainly opened my eyes to food as something of interest and something to care about. When I moved back to the States, I realized I was living in Germany, then Hungary, but spent most of my time in Germany. And in Germany, when you rent an apartment, the kitchen doesn't, I mean, it's a room, but the counters and the appliances don't necessarily come with the apartment. They're generally sold from the old tenant to the new tenant. Well, I moved into an apartment that had just been built, so I had to go get a kitchen. And I put a kitchen in, and then when I left, I realized I'd never used the stove. I had been on the road that much. When I moved back to the States, I said, maybe I'll try cooking, and developed a facility with it. But I had also at this point developed a real interest in it. After I left network television and was trying to make a go of it on my own, I was pitching the Food Network. Well, I ended up doing stuff for the Food Network because Al Roker had worked on the Weekend Today show when I was the co-producer of that. So I knew Al. When I went on my own, no one was hiring me. So I called Al. I said, you got any work I could do? And his production company was doing some stuff for the Food Network. So he put me in touch with them. Long story short, I'm on the phone pitching this development executive and failing, as I had repeatedly. And she said to me, don't you have anything about diners? I said, oh, yeah, I'm developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I told her all about it. And this was late on a Thursday or a Friday. And she said, that sounds good. Get me a write-up on Monday. We have a meeting on Tuesday. I put the phone down and I thought, well, that's great. But I didn't have a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives in development. I had just made it up on the spot.
Yeah, it was like the equivalent of a cocktail napkin drawing at that point, right?
Yeah, we just, fake it till you make it. I literally pulled it out of thin air. But I spent the weekend researching and talking to restaurant folks and pitched it on Monday, and they picked up a special, and then they picked up the series.
That's kismet. That's amazing.
It was, look, I'd rather be lucky than good.
Indeed. So 11 great seasons, right? With Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives.
I created and I executive produced the first 11 seasons, then I moved on.
It's so incredible. Do you have was there anything in your childhood? Do you have any childhood core food memories or anything that shaped your love, or was it really the travel that kind of forced you to try new things?
It was mostly the travel. My mother, who was a remarkable mom and a great accountant, was the world's worst cook. So I didn't grow up. I mean, yeah, there were the special occasion Jewish celebratory meals that were cooked by grandparents. But my mom, I was an adult before I realized a steak could be good. The one food memory I have as a child that did stay with me, because while I was born in the New York area, my parents escaped with us to New England. I grew up 90 miles west of Boston, and we would take summer vacations in Maine. I fell in love with lobster at a very young age, and my mother couldn't kill that because there was a local supermarket that sent a truck to Boston every morning. They'd bring the lobster back and they would steam it for you, and then mom could pick it up on the way home from work. And by the way, please, folks, if you're gonna make lobster, steam it. Don't boil it and turn it soggy. Thank you.
Yeah, or into a rubber band, but there's a fine line between the both.
Oh, it's tough. But that was the only childhood food memory that stayed with me. I still love lobster.
So you had developed this love for food through meeting all these people in these other countries,
Mhm.
doing all the travel and the journalism. And how does that translate to creating this series? So you had until Monday to write like a one-page mock-up for this
Yeah,
series. Go ahead.
it had to be more than a mock-up. I mean,
Sure.
I basically called all around the country to people. This was before the internet was your basic source for everything, and you
Mhm.
could just, go online and read Galveston magazine.
Right.
This was when you had to call people at Galveston magazine and say, I'm looking for some guidance here. Where would you eat if you had one night in your town? What's the best truly local food there? And it was through that sort of research that I stacked 6 restaurants for a 1-hour special. And storytelling. You come up with in TV. You come up with a structure.
Mhm.
You don't want to be repetitive, but you have to give people something they're comfortable and expect. So I developed a structure that weekend for diners where basically we'd find a place, tell you why it mattered, cook 2 of its dishes, and then sample them with customers. 1 or 2 dishes, it depended on the location.
Right.
Um, and that was pretty much the template that we stuck to. I don't know what they do today. I assume it's pretty much the same. Um, and the one thing, there were 2 things that were important to me. I was not going to fall down the rabbit hole of reality television and making things up. In my career, I had spent a fair amount of it as an investigative reporter. I ran the investigative unit at 2020 for a while. And I held the show to the same standards of truth and accuracy that I held the 2020 pieces to. Everything we did had to be, to the best of our knowledge, honest and correct. Secondly, I included every single step in the making of every dish. None of this, jumping over 3 ingredients. If you VHS the show, put it on, and kept pausing it, you could make the dish.
Right.
Although we also did put the recipes online. I wanted this, unlike so many other reality shows, to be true,
Mhm.
which included the fact that if a restaurant didn't measure up, we didn't use it.
Right. Where did you find the restaurants? That's one of our listener questions. They really want to know if it was all listener
No,
recommendations
no, 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 no. Listener
or,
recommendations,
excuse me, viewer recommendations.
yeah, viewer recommendations tended to be, for the most part, useless
Mm,
because there is much that people love about their local favorite restaurant. Unbeknownst to them, it often isn't the quality of the food.
right.
You'd hear from people who tell you that this place makes the absolute best something. And then when you check it out, you find out that it's a Cisco product.
Mm,
There's a well-known pancake house here at the Jersey Shore that I figured would be a no-brainer. Well, they use boxed pancake mix. That's not good enough for us. We did find a diner in St. Paul, Minnesota, which has been there forever, and I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten the name of it, but they make their own pancake batter.
right.
That's what it takes to be on the air. Now, over time, we included a certain number of viewer suggestions, the ones that passed the test. But mostly the research is starting with who in town would know what's good, and then vigorously interviewing the people who own or cook at those restaurants to find out if their process met our bar. And my researchers would come to me with, these are the places we're looking at, and I would look at what they'd found, and I'd send them back for further questions. um we had a 5% loss rate. Places that we had vetted that sounded good, that when a guy in the crew walked in, uh-uh. So we just wouldn't do those. And the network, when they found out about it, thought I was insane because I took the monetary hit on those. But I just wasn't gonna I wasn't going to fake it.
I think sometimes that's necessary, though. I mean, it might seem like taking the monetary hit when it's the right thing.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I did fine. I'm not complaining. My bank account is not upset.
No, I just mean like I think it's normal that that looks crazy to somebody with a different perspective, right? Because in that moment you have to make the best decision that you can.
You'd have a show executive at the network saying, "Well, of something, I don't know, it involved ice cream and a flavor or something," and the executive in New York said, "Well, can't you just say it is?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. It's just not going to happen."
Well, as a proud owner of one of the cookbooks that came off of the series, like I haven't been disappointed from any place that I've ever visited.
That's good.
It's great, and I feel like it encouraged people to get out there and travel more, and obviously it lends visibility to places that people should be trying. And go ahead.
One of the things I was pleased by, and I didn't realize it at the time we started the show, was we saved, in my tenure there, we saved a number of restaurants that were on the verge of going under. My daughter, when she was in high school, was a competitive equestrian. And one of the places we would go for her to compete was Lexington, Kentucky. It got to the point where I couldn't go to this particular barbecue joint in Lexington because they wouldn't let me pay. And they would just fill the table up with food because it turns out they were about to shut their doors. And then we put them on the show and business exploded. I didn't do it for that reason, but I'm certainly glad it happened.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm sure it was life-changing for so many places that made it onto the series. And I know, so I lived in Austin for 9 years, and I'm a huge fan of the Salt Lick down in Dripping Springs, and having the plaque by the door. I mean, I know it made a huge difference. They weren't hurting for business before, but then they certainly weren't afterward,
Yeah, the place we did when I was still with the show, in fact, I think it was season 1 because I was in the field on it. We did Louis Miller's in Taylor, Texas, which would be my death row meal if it weren't lox.
Yeah, you say it's still your favorite.
Oh, God. And the technique, I mean, at the time Bobby was alive and was running the place. His son has it now, but Bobby, in the middle of an interview, just turning around and moving briskets, and you'd ask him why. He said, "Well, this had to go there and that had to go there." What skill, what brilliance.
Yeah.
That's the best piece of meat I've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, certainly something that you can't teach, but that kind of instinct.
No, well, you can. It's done by osmosis, and I also think, and this may be controversial, there's people that can, and there's people that can't. I am an eager home cook. I still have to cut the steak open to see if it's done. I don't have the it that you as a chef have to just know. Now, there are other things for which I do have the it. Put me into a crisis situation on deadline with a TV crew, I'll do okay. But I was not naturally granted the special powers it takes to really, hello, Fred, to really be a good chef. Uh-oh. I believe we have a standoff between a beagle and a cat. Hey, Fred, cool it. Come here. Come on. Thank you. And you need that. I believe that the great chefs, and when I say great chef, I don't care if you're running a food truck, okay? I think great chefs are born. Then they learn, they enhance, they improve. But you got to have the cooking, Gene.
Absolutely. And whether you're learning from a grandmother at a young age or whether you get into it on your own. I mean, even if you don't have parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles that you're learning from, but it's just like music, in my opinion. You're going to go play with other people and you're going to learn from other people and you're going to put yourself in the positions necessary to hone your craft. But yeah, you do have to have a little bit of a knack for sure.
Which is not to say that those of us without that gene can't have a lot of fun cooking.
Of course.
I adore cooking. I just know that I'm not doing interviews and turning around behind me without having seen the product to do something to it.
I mean, that's incredible.
And
Yeah, it's
seriously,
incredible.
if I'm having people over for steak, there's one extra steak in there that I can cut open from time to time and make sure.
It's like the first pancake of your steaks.
Oh, the first pancake, yes. The first pancake. But by the way, I don't waste the steak. I do chef's steak salad the next day with blue cheese. I mean,
Of course.
yeah.
I would do like a Thai style peanut sauce,
Oh.
some chow mein noodles, something
What
like
do you?
that.
I make
Steak
a
salad.
very basic Thai sauce that's peanut butter and coconut milk based. What do you do?
Sure. So that would be a really good base for like a Penang curry, like with the coconut element. I like to use a little chili paste and fish sauce, and then like crushed, like, so I use that. It's the only place that I would use crunchy peanut butter, and then like a little rice wine vinegar. So really the ingredients are pretty pan Asian, but that's what I do, like for a spring roll dipping sauce. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Fish sauce needs a new name. If you just gave it a new name, Americans would buy it.
It needs the sea bass treatment.
Exactly. Chilean. What was it? Something toothfish?
Patagonian toothfish. It just wouldn't sell, so they changed the name to Chilean sea bass, which is really a misnomer, but it did wonders for the product.
Well, I think in the book I tell the story of calamari.
Yes. Yes.
Calamari was going for 10 cents a pound. No.
Yes.
10 cents a pound as bait. And then someone said, let's call it calamari and make it an appetizer. And boom, it was at every TGI Fridays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, they used to feed lobster to prisoners, and it was bycatch. And then it was over, it was to overfish.
That's an urban myth.
Is it?
Sorry.
Really, though? No, it's not.
That's why it's not in my book.
Okay, tell me why it's an urban myth. Tell me the true story then.
No, lobster was looked down upon, but there's no evidence, despite the widespread belief, there's no evidence they fed it to prisoners.
Okay, but it was a peasant food, right?
Oh God, yes. No one ever wanted to eat lobster. No, it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was. They were everywhere. You didn't want lobster. The only urban myth is the prisoner thing.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, no. The early settlers, some of the first Europeans Brits to settle. It may have been Jamestown, but I'm not sure which. There's writing where they're complaining that all there is to eat is lobster. No, lobster was at the bottom of the heap. Absolutely.
If I had never seen one, I don't know that I would be very apt to want to eat it. But at the same time, if I was starving, I wouldn't care.
Yeah, but it's like, Fred. Fred's a beagle. He makes himself known. He's fighting with the cat in the closet right now. My apologies.
Hello, Fred.
Hey, Fred. Come here, you little bozo. I love you. Who's the first one who had the guts to eat an oyster?
Right. I mean, it looks like a pile of snot.
It does. Of course. And again, even more so than lobster, back in the day, oysters were in boundless supply. I mean, New York Harbor was just filled with oysters. It was the fast food of its day.
I find it hard to fathom being the first one to eat anything, like the depth of bravery that it takes to go, I'm gonna eat this, whatever it was, whether it's water beetles in Asia or the first person who put chocolate on a cricket or a grasshopper, just...
Well, yeah, it's funny. I'm not, I've never tried insects, but they're going to be a very important source of food. Insects are going to be a very important source of food protein as population continues to increase worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of the food landscape for the future.
When they started selling fried grasshoppers at Seattle Mariners baseball, was it Seattle or San Francisco? One of those ballparks. It started as a gimmick, but it became an incredibly popular snack.
Yeah.
I don't know what they taste like, but I would assume it's like any other snack you fry, which is basically you taste the batter.
Yeah, I mean somewhat, but they're leggy not in a good way, like a wine. So
they're leggy in a not good way.
In a not good way. It's the
Right?
texture.
Yeah,
I think, like most things, I don't know. It's
it's
just one of those
cultural. I
things.
mean, who eats what? We are just horrified if people eat horse meat.
Mhm.
I've owned horses. I love horses. I can't conceive of eating horse meat. But where it's normal, it's normal. So we make odd choices that way. People don't like offal. They don't like nose to tail cooking, but they don't stop to think what's in their sausages.
Right.
Well,
as long as it's inside a casing and fried up next to eggs, it's fine.
Yeah,
but nobody wants to know the name of nobody's.
We're a unique culture in that way, in that I can't say most, I don't have that academic background. Many other cultures prize the use of the entire animal, and they prize the variety of textures. I'm thinking specifically of Chinese cuisines, the variety of textures that you can get from the jelly-like texture of a tendon. Contrasted to the firmer texture of a piece of meat. We don't, and it makes us queasy as a culture. But I wrote in the Chinese food chapter that there's a significant increase in the number of places in America you can now get Chinese food, which I will not call authentic. I will say Chinese food as served in China, which includes a much broader range of parts of the animal. I was taken in research for the book to a large Chinese food hall in Queens, in New York, in a place pretty close to where I was born, which was Jewish and Italian at the time. Now it's mostly Asian, heavily Chinese. And among the ingredients available to me in something called dry pot, which is a wonderful dish, you get to pick what you want, and you could have artery, you could have tendon, you could have congealed duck blood, and I don't say this to shock anyone in any way. It was all good, by the way. I didn't have artery. Interestingly enough, that's where my American squeamishness kicked in.
It was just one step too far.
I've never enjoyed giving blood, so Although the congealed duck blood, which was like a piece of liverwurst, it was fantastic.
Oh man, I love liverwurst too.
Oh, so do I.
It sounds so
my
good.
wife hates liverwurst, so if it's in the fridge, I know I'm going to get it.
I think that organ meats and offal they're going to have their day soon, as we look at decrease in farmland and farmers themselves and different sources of meat and water, and it's coming. The day is coming where sweetbread will be as ubiquitous as chicken tenders are.
Sweetbreads are fantastic.
That's so good.
We calf's liver with bacon and onions is in our rotation here at home in terms of things that we regularly eat. It disgusts many people, but it's great.
I can walk to a little place in my neighborhood called Williams Fried Chicken that has the most glorious fried chicken livers and gizzards. And I know that they're doing them by hand, because by the time you get it, most of the breading's falling off, but it's because of the amount of food that's in the box. It's not for poor production, but it's just so amazing. And then I love a good brown gravy, calf's liver, and onions, and I guess it depends on where you grow up, but you have to know how to treat it too. I soak mine in buttermilk all night. The acid and the lactose, it pulls some of that gnarliness out of the liver. But if you didn't grow up somewhere where you were regularly exposed to things like liver and hearts and kidneys and everything else, then it can certainly make a huge difference with your comfort level.
Well, yeah, look, my grandmother used to make chicken livers. Now, what's interesting is you're talking about where you get them, they're breaded. Yeah, no, the Eastern European Jewish style there was no breading. It was just, I don't know if she boiled them or fried them or baked them, but they were great. They're very rich. No, it's all that. There's so much that's so good that people are afraid of, like black pudding, blood sausage.
Yeah.
The first time I had it, I was in Germany before I was living there. I was still living in London. And we went to a place in, at the time, West Berlin. Now, obviously, it's Berlin, but to an old restaurant called Hartke, which has been there forever. And our crews love to go there. Anyway, I got a plate of something, and I have the fork halfway to my mouth in a way that I cannot stop it, basically, without the food going everywhere. And just before it goes into my mouth, my correspondent says, "Oh, yeah, you'll like that. I love blood sausage." That was great,
I mean, if you're growing up in a place where black pudding or a white, pudding is a part of your everyday breakfast, then you really just don't know that you don't know that anything's wrong with it, right?
Yeah,
you don't know that you're not supposed to like it.
There's nothing weirder than a true British breakfast with baked beans.
I love it, though.
Oh, yeah, no, it's what cracks me
up. But full English.
I was covering the Troubles in Belfast for a while, the Troubles as they call them, and I had a full Irish breakfast one morning, which is fried everything. Got ready to go to work, left the hotel, got to the parking lot, turned around, walked back to my room, threw up, and then went to work.
No.
They hadn't been changing that oil in a while.
It's just too much. There's few things more satisfying maybe than like after a night of heavy entertainment, right? Where you've got a full proper fry up and maybe a half of a warm Guinness.
Oh yeah,
but under the right conditions, right?
Well, look, the conditions are always right for Guinness. When I used to fly to Belfast from London, I think it was from Stansfield. Anyway, it was not from Heathrow, on a small carrier, and it was a 6 a.m. flight. It was horrible, but they served breakfast. Back when airlines served food.
Yeah, when you could get an actual meal.
The standard breakfast was haggis. And it was, I love haggis. It was fantastic.
I like it too.
I mean, look, every culture has the high fat, high calorie, low price leftover stuff shoved in a tube that farmers could eat early in the morning to fuel the morning. Jewish cuisine has something called kishka. It's the same thing. And haggis is so good, and I hear people like turn their noses up at it, and I say, guys, wake up. It's especially good with a shot of single malt.
It's delicious. And I remember thinking the same thing. I think I was probably in the third year of my career, and I had the chance to try it at a St. Patrick's Day festival, and I had quite a few green beers, and I think that's the only way that I had the courage to do so, because I knew that I had to put food in there or I was going to be extremely hungover and very late for my morning junior sous chef shift the next day. So I was like, well, I have a choice to make. I can either get extremely drunk or I can eat this. And I ended up loving it. And thus began the lifelong love affair with haggis.
Well, it's, and it's interesting because the use of spice, the use of flavor to make what may not necessarily be intrinsically palatable, wonderful, is something that is a skill. It's an art. It developed over hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a truly wonderful thing. It really is.
It really is. And it's when we go back to talking about being an artisan before, artisanal things were hip. It's just knowing how to treat ingredients correctly and with the right amount of respect and reverence. And then, techniques. There's a lot to be said about techniques. And people ask me all the time, like, do you have a recipe for this? Do you have a recipe for that? And I go, like, I don't really use recipes. I have technique. And it's really nothing against anybody who wants to use a recipe, or in baking where it's a science, you really need a recipe, right? But in savory applications, a recipe is just a guideline. It's a good jumping off point, and anybody can bring, their own feelings and love into a dish, but you just have to know how to use the ingredients.
Yeah, and you can look. There's nothing better than opening the fridge and saying, "What can I do with this?" I made mashed potatoes the other day. Hadn't made mashed potatoes in years. Now I'm making a lot, but inexplicably, I had run out of both butter and milk. So I made my mashed potatoes with sour cream and grated cheddar.
That sounds amazing.
It was fantastic. We had a friend over who is one of those picky eaters. She was like licking the bowl. It was like, okay, I guess I'll put this in rotation.
And I think those are the most gratifying moments for me when I can get somebody to look at food differently and give it another try, because of something that I've done or come up with. And but then all the time, that same experience that you and I find so gratifying, like opening the fridge and going, "What am I going to do today?" The other home cooks will find it so daunting to the point where it'll keep them from trying. Because there's just a lot of stigma there about like, what if I make a mistake? And I mean, but some mistakes are delicious,
Hey, I have no shame. I will invent a dish and serve it to company. And it ain't always good.
They're not always ones that have to be repeated, in other words, right?
Yeah, but the worst thing is, I've actually posted this on Instagram. Made a fabulous red sauce tonight, better than normal, and I make a good red sauce to start with. But the tragedy is, I don't know what I did to make this one better.
Yeah,
I can't replicate it.
It takes a little bit of documentation, but also sometimes the conditions are just right. Like sometimes the piece of Parmesan rind that you have is a certain age, and it's there's a certain amount of time, and it's
Parmesan rind in the first place.
Right. Sometimes you have, if you're using like canned San Marzano, sometimes it's just the right crop and it was the right time, and that's kind of the magic of.
And sometimes you get the one can that actually has San Marzanos in it, despite the label.
Also that. I have some other listener questions about diners, drive-ins, and dives, if you don't mind.
Feel free. Let me go up.
So Andy wants to know if you are able to share the worst thing you ever tasted without naming the place. And if you can't, that's fine.
First of all, I was only on the road in the first season.
Okay. So any notable bad experiences?
No, I mean, we picked places carefully to be good. So it's not, if we were shocked by something that was terrible, we didn't run it.
It never made it to air then.
Yeah, there's no reason to do an uplifting show about a place where you have to say this isn't good. That's, I would get people would complain that Guy seems to like everything. And my answer was, well, he did. There are different degrees of like, something can be crunch-alicious or it can be the best dish he's ever had. But we're honest about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you have a really, really good filter to make sure that,
we were very, very careful.
Did you choose a city at first and then go figure out what was in that city, or like how did that process work?
Interesting. We are now discussing how you budget a television show.
I want to know.
we would choose as much as possible locations that gave us access to multiple states or regions, because you'd go out and shoot 4 or 5 places at a time and then checkerboard them into the season. So we wanted as much geographical diversity as possible. So, for example, Kansas City would be a great place to go because you've got the Kansas side and the Missouri side. So within an hour's drive of Kansas City, you can be in rural Kansas at a restaurant. So, yes, location had a lot to do with how we put the show together. It's not like I said, let's do a show on hamburgers and just go find a bunch of hamburger places. No, it was location based.
Okay. And unlike Texas, where you would have to do one location in one day because it takes 50 hours to drive across the state.
Yeah, but Texas is actually not a bad example because you could shoot in Austin, Dallas, and Houston all with less than a day's drive between. So you shoot a place in Austin on Monday. And well, Austin's a bad example because it's such a good food town. You'd want to shoot a bunch there and spread it out. But
Indeed.
to use it as a production example, yeah, you could shoot Austin, Dallas, Houston, Galveston in one trip, and that's great.
Yeah. It's having lived here my whole life, I feel like the drive gets longer and longer the older I get. It's probably just a byproduct of having less patience.
It does. Did you ever go to Franklin's, by the way, in Austin?
Yes, I've played entire. Oh yeah, I've played entire games of Monopoly. I drank several 6-packs of beer while waiting in line. It also took me nearly 2 to 3 months to try it because it sold out every single time I was able to be there to wait in line.
He just opened a new place.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it was. It might be Gulf cuisine. I don't know. It involves.
Yes. There is, I cannot remember what it's called. I haven't been to Austin in a little while, but I know that there is gumbo, I believe, involved on the menu. So, yeah. Well, so there's a merger between Aaron Franklin and Tyson Cole that's called Loro, and it's an Asian smokehouse concept. But the other place that you are thinking of is a New Orleans style
that's it.
Smoke spot that's opening soon, and so it's going to be called Uptown Sports Club.
I hope he's keeping the quality up at Franklin's.
Yeah, I hope so too. It seems like something you would just need to manage really closely. Once it hits like a mass production, like a critical mass kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's as good as they say it is. It's completely worth the wait in line. And I was just talking to a friend about this on a previous episode of the Food for Thought cast, that there's a certain camaraderie that you build while you're waiting in line for something that's highly anticipated. So you kind of can't beat those experiences. This gentleman has a food podcast as well, and he's in the Columbus, Ohio area, and he was talking about how during COVID they had ordered Franklin's briskets through Goldbelly online, and he said that they were just as good, reheated at home. But I said, you're really missing out on the experience. Right?
Wow. Well, there's only one customer, to the best of my knowledge, who did not have to wait in line.
President Obama.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. And when he paid for everybody behind him in line, which I thought was really awesome. So
that's good.
You can't beat it. So a life lived of investigative journalism, and obviously, sorry to make a pun, but a hunger to learn and grow and travel and try new things, and then 11 years executive producing, and then
11 seasons.
11 seasons, right? 11 seasons executive producing Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives. And what are you up to now?
Well, I have a couple of books in the works, but the project that is taking most of my time these days is a syndicated radio show I do called Martini Music, which is about the music of the 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. Sinatra, Peggy Lee, that sort of thing. I started in radio at the age of 14, and I guess I couldn't give it up.
Where do we find this?
Well, it's a station by station thing. So Google it and see if I'm in your market. I don't think I'm in. You're in Dallas, right? No, I'm not in Dallas. Call your local radio station in Dallas and tell them to pick up my show.
Oh, I certainly will do that.
Please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know if there was like an online or an app where we might be able to pick it up.
It's entirely old school terrestrial radio. So if you've got a station in Dallas that you think might like a couple hours of this every weekend, give them a call and tell them to pursue it.
Yeah, there are definitely some noteworthy independent stations around. So yeah, I'm going to have to check it out somehow. Maybe somebody on Instagram or Twitter has it. has found it somewhere, right?
Please. I can't keep up with the sales team. I don't know what my syndicator's done lately. I just keep cranking the shows out.
Oh, I love it. Well, if you're enjoying it, then I know the listeners are no doubt enjoying it as well, because I think that translates for sure. When you're talking about, when you're talking about old school terrestrial radio, like, right? That's artisan.
Well, yeah. Look, I started out At WCAT in Orange, Massachusetts, the kitty cat with the 1,000-watt meow.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. That's
I
amazing.
was 14 or 15 at the time.
And the name of the book that's coming out?
I don't know what the name of the beer book's going to be. The food book I'm working on will be called Eating While Standing. It's about hot dog carts and food trucks and food halls and food at baseball games. It's food that is not served to you by a wait person.
So
Hello, Fred,
basically counter service.
Counter, stand up, yeah, that sort of thing. Also, I'm exploring the degree to which convenience stores have turned into restaurants.
Okay, I think that's fair. I mean,
yeah, Wawa in my part of the world is people go to Wawa on purpose for the food. Now, I can question that in an area that is full of true Italian delis, but hey, that's it's become a big part of convenience stores. In fact, the whole concept of eating in your car, obviously. I interviewed, what is their product? Somebody I interviewed for the book. I have to go into my notes. Oh, yeah. They produce the containers that fast food can go into.
Oh, I see.
That fit in the car cup holder.
In the cup holder.
Because things are sold in basically cup holder cups now.
Wow.
Candy and some savory things.
I love that. Well, I would say in the South, I'm not going to say it's the equivalent of Wawa. I've been to Wawa. I think they're great. But we have Buc-ee's. And
no, Buc-ee. Look, there's an argument that Buc-ee's is even bigger. Buc-ee's, I believe it's Buc-ee's that just opened up in Tennessee.
I think so.
They're moving their footprint. Buc-ee's is something remarkable. I mean, they're huge. Huge.
But it's the same idea. I mean, I can go there. I think there are 3 within driving distance of me. Driving distance is kind of irrelevant in Texas, but it just depends on what you want to budget for gas. But at least within a half hour of me, there's one. And I love it. I'm not ashamed to say I think their brisket sandwiches are really good.
There's nothing wrong with saying that. I mean, there's a chain. I should open my notes for the book. There's a chain in, I think it's Iowa, started in Iowa, that is famous for their pizza made on site.
Really?
They years ago, there was some small town, I think Iowa, where there were like no restaurants, and they started making and serving pizza, and it became their thing at all of their locations now. Wow. So no, it's plus, it's interesting. This isn't really food related, but the future of the convenience store that's going to be, I think, the thing that makes the electric car viable, because as convenience store chains start putting in recharging facilities, that's going to make it possible for someone to get on the highway and feel secure that within 200 or 250 miles, they're going to be able to recharge their car.
Right. It needs that level of accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
To become more mainstream. But if we're talking about convenience stores, I'm sure this is something that you'll explore. But I mean, really the model of like the Japanese 7-Eleven, they offer so much, They offer so much handmade food and hot and cold selections. It's crazy.
But remember, that's, I guess, only in New York, but the bodega in New York for years has been so much more than a convenience store. My daughter was graduating college, which is why you need to keep buying my book, because she went to Columbia all the way through her MFA. And
got it.
If you want to set fire to your money, that's the way. Anyway, we're at her graduation, and I was designated the family member to go across the street and get some breakfast sandwiches, which are, certainly in New York a staple. And I crossed the street, and there were 2 storefronts, and one of them had a long line coming out of it, and one of them had nothing coming out of it. I went into the one with nothing coming out of it, which I would have chosen anyway,
Right.
because the line was coming out of Starbucks, where if you wanted to get prepackaged plastic food,
Yeah.
they were glad to put it in a convection microwave.
Yep.
I walked into the bodega where some guy had been working behind that seasoned grill for years,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew how to do a bacon, egg, and cheese.
Yeah.
That's so good.
I mean, and there's something
good.
to be said about. So I visited New York for the first time a couple years
Mhm.
ago, and I had 3 weeks there, and
Wow.
I was traveling for work, and
Ooh.
so I had a per diem, and I ate my way through the city by design, and that's how I travel anyway. It's not about what I'm going to see; it's about when are we going to eat.
Right.
Oh, we're going to go see Mount Rushmore. No, I want to go find like the best Pocky or what, whatever.
Right.
And so, it's just what it is. But there's something to be said about the bodegas and the 24-hour deli and the access to food all the time. And I was working insane hours, but I was still able to go find anything that I wanted at 2 a.m, just as if it was 2 p.m. And I live in I live in an area of East Dallas it's fairly suburban. I don't live right in the middle of the city, but basically your dining options dry up after 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Not
in New York.
Nope. And there's always something going on, but I can't tell you how many chopped cheese I ate. I think I lost count. I lost count.
The thing about New York beyond availability is general quality.
Mm-hmm.
New York, Paris, Madrid, London, Rome, obviously, these are places that if you just randomly choose a restaurant and walk into it, you have a 75% or above chance of getting a good meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. And I'm talking, not the 5-star stuff. I'm talking the general expectation of food quality in certain places. Well, certainly San Francisco, for example, is higher than in other places.
Yeah,
And,
the standards are really high, and people pay for that expectation. I mean, you can see.
You show up in New York as never having been there before, and you're paying $24 for a sandwich. You go, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, but it was a really good sandwich. It was a really, really good sandwich. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about how. So it would be easy for somebody like myself who had never been to New York to go. People are willing to spend it. And that's why they keep pricing it that way. But there's a lot to be said about accessibility, how approachable things are, just the mass of things that are available within a certain amount of space, right? And it's not just because it's a heavy population either. It's just because people are driving that. There's a following there.
There's a problem with that, though, more and more, which is real estate prices are forcing restaurants out. In Manhattan, that's almost at crisis stage. It's very hard to make money running a restaurant, even at those prices in Manhattan.
Yeah,
because if the landlord can get a certain amount of money for someone to put retail in there, and it's more than what a restaurant owner can pay the restaurants out. There have been several restaurants that closed in the past. Well, the pandemic had a lot to do with it, but real estate prices are tough. Very tough.
Indeed they are. David, where can folks find you online if you want to be found?
I want to be found. There's a Facebook page for Food Americana. There's also a Facebook page for me. The interesting stuff ends up on both. But I'm reachable. Send me a message. I'll answer it. Always looking to talk to people, hear from people. Have anyone call their local radio station and ask for martini music. Anything I can do.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I think the only thing that would have made this better interview is if there was a huge table of food in between the two of us.
Yeah, this was definitely a bagels and lox conversation. And it was really nice chatting with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap for today. Until the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast, make good food, eat good food, share it, and be kind to one another.
Thanks so much for listening today. You are part of what makes us special, and we are so glad you joined us. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. Just like food, delicious podcasts are better when you share them with others. Come back for seconds wherever podcasts are served, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Food for Thoughtcast or at www.foodforthoughtcast.com, where you can link to all podcast players, or you can send us an email at foodforthoughtcmc@gmail.com.